In the small and picturesque town of Snowy Pines, Christmas was more than just a celebration. It was almost a mystical event. The streets were adorned with lights that twinkled like stars. The scent of fresh pine mingled with the aroma of hot chocolate, and the townsfolk decorated their homes with such care and creativity that every window seemed to turn into a living postcard. At the heart of the town stood a towering Christmas tree, its branches sparkling with hundreds of lights, serving as the beating heart of the festive season. Among the residents, there was a little girl who seemed to embody the very spirit of Christmas. 8-year-old Emily Johnson was small for her age, but her smile was big enough to warm even the coldest of winters. Despite the hardships she faced, Emily always found something to be grateful for. Ever since her father's tragic death in an accident, Emily and her mother Clara had learned to get by with very little. Clara worked tirelessly as a cashier at the local market, striving to make ends meet, though her face bore a weariness that not even Christmas could ease. That year things felt different. Their modest home was less decorated than usual. The songs Clara used to sing while cooking had vanished, replaced by a silence that seemed to stretch as endlessly as the snow outside, blanketing everything with a coldness Emily couldn't quite understand. Still, her spirits lifted when she heard about the town's annual Christmas tree lighting ceremony. Like every year, the townspeople would gather to mark the official start of the holiday season, and Emily was determined not to miss it. On the night of the ceremony, the frigid air was sharp as glass, but the square was alive with laughter and anticipation. Emily, wearing her worn red beanie, dashed toward the line to meet Santa Claus. This year, Santa was played by Mr. Henry, an elderly man known for his kind demeanor and a melancholy gaze that hinted at a heavy past. When it was her turn, Emily climbed onto the makeshift platform and looked at Santa with an earnestness rare for someone her age. "So, little one," Henry said in a cheerful but slightly weary voice, "what would you like for Christmas this year?" Emily hesitated, biting her lower lip before meeting his eyes. Then, with surprising seriousness, she replied, "Santa, I just want my mom to smile again." For a moment, the bustling square seemed to fall silent. Henry blinked, caught off guard, and a look of confusion crossed his face. This wasn't the kind of request he was used to hearing. Most children asked for toys, bicycles, or video games. But Emily's wish was for something no store-bought gift could provide. "Your mom?" Henry asked, his voice faltering slightly. "Why isn't she smiling, sweetheart?" Emily shrugged, her eyes shining with a mix of sadness and hope. "Because she's sad. I think she misses my dad." Henry nodded slowly, a pang of emotion tightening his chest. Something about Emily's wish struck a deeply personal chord. As the line moved on and Emily walked away, Henry sat still, gazing thoughtfully at the tree's glowing lights. That night, as he made his way back to his small, secluded cabin, he couldn't shake the memory of Emily's gaze or the simple, heartbreaking words she had spoken. In the dim light of his garage, Henry found himself standing before an old, dusty box. Inside were letters from children, collected over many years of volunteering as Santa. As he leafed through them, one letter caught his eye, written years ago by none other than Emily. Snow was gently falling over Snowy Pines, covering the small town in a white blanket that sparkled under the morning sunlight. That day, as the townsfolk went about their routines, Henry couldn't shake Emily's request from his mind. He felt like a reluctant guardian of a profound secret, one that demanded action but left him paralyzed. After all, he wasn't just the town's volunteer Santa Claus. He was a lonely man who spent his days trying to avoid the ghosts of his past. Henry Thompson had once been a prominent figure in Snowy Pines. Together with his wife Margaret, he had run the local toy store, a true treasure trove for children and adults alike. But after Margaret passed away, Henry withdrew from the world, turning his home into a silent refuge. Playing Santa Claus was his way of recapturing a little of the joy Margaret had so loved about Christmas. Yet Emily's wish was unlike anything he had ever encountered, and he knew he couldn't ignore the depth of her plea. Meanwhile, Emily was on her own mission. She spent her afternoons trying to bring a little light back into her mother Clara's life. Since the accident that had taken her father's life, Clara seemed lost in a world of obligations and exhaustion. Nights were quiet, filled only with the ticking of the kitchen clock or the wind whistling past the windows. Determined to make a difference, Emily started crafting small gestures to rekindle the Christmas spirit at home. With the help of her best friend Noah, a clever boy full of ideas, Emily began creating handmade Christmas cards, decorating them with colorful drawings and heartfelt messages. She left them around the house, on her mother's pillow, on the breakfast table, even on the bathroom mirror. Messages like, "Mom, I love you more than anything," or "Don't forget how special you are," were scrawled in her clumsy handwriting, but brimming with emotion. Yet Clara seemed unreachable. A faint smile would flicker across her face now and then, only to be swallowed up again by fatigue. As Emily fought her battle at home, Henry decided to open the chest he had found in his garage. Inside, he discovered dozens of letters written by children over the years. Most were simple requests for toys, but a few stood out for their purity of heart. He couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion when he came across a letter written by Emily 3 years earlier. In that letter, she hadn't asked for toys or sweets. Instead, her request was just as selfless. "Dear Santa, I just want my dad to get better. I don't want to see my mom cry anymore." Henry held the letter for a long time, his heart heavy. He realized Emily was an extraordinary girl, someone who, even in the face of hardship, thought of others first. More than that, he saw in her words a reflection of his own pain. Like Clara, he had also lost someone he loved dearly, and the thought of helping this family reignited something in his soul. Driven by a desire to do something meaningful, Henry began planning a way to bring joy not just to Emily and Clara, but to the entire Snowy Pines community, which seemed to have lost some of its Christmas magic in recent years. He started visiting the townspeople, pitching an idea for a special event, a community Christmas market where people could exchange acts of kindness instead of material gifts. However, the responses were disheartening. Many said they were too busy, while others dismissed the idea as too much effort. Meanwhile, Emily and Noah continued with their own plans. Noah, always brimming with creative ideas, proposed something bold, organizing a small Christmas party at Emily's house as a surprise for Clara. They spent days planning, gathering recycled materials and old decorations to transform the living room. But on the day everything was ready, Clara came home early from work. When she walked into the transformed living room, her reaction was unexpected. Instead of being moved, she sat down on the couch and began to cry. Emily, confused and hurt, ran to her room, with Noah following close behind. Once there, he tried to comfort her, but it was clear the little girl was beginning to lose hope. "Maybe she'll never smile again," Emily said in a low, trembling voice. Noah, however, refused to give up. "What if we ask Santa for help? I mean, Mr. Henry. He seems to understand these things." Reluctantly, Emily agreed. Together, they went to Henry's house, a place Emily had never visited before. When they knocked on the door, they were greeted by an unexpected sight. Henry, sitting in an armchair in his living room, holding a yellowed letter. When he saw the children, he stood up hesitantly, but his expression revealed he was deeply moved. "This letter," he said, showing the paper to the children. "It was written by your mother, Emily, a long time ago when she was your age." Emily looked at the letter, surprised, as Henry began to read it aloud. "Dear Santa, please never let my family lose hope in Christmas. I know Christmas can be magical." The words echoed in the room, bringing an unexpected revelation. The connection between Emily, Clara, and Henry was deeper than any of them had imagined, and the idea that hope could still be restored began to take shape. The next morning, Henry was still reflecting on Clara's letter. He couldn't shake the weight of the words written by a little girl who, years ago, believed in the magic of Christmas, even during difficult times. Now, it seemed that magic was in his hands to restore, not just for Clara, but for the entire town. Determined, he began to devise a more ambitious plan. He needed to find a way to rally Snowy Pines and reignite the Christmas spirit, something bigger than himself or any one person. Meanwhile, Emily and Noah were restless. The revelation of Clara's letter gave them a new perspective, but it didn't present a clear solution. Noah, with his ever-creative mind, suggested they use Clara's words to remind the town of what Christmas truly meant. "If your mom believed so much in Christmas when she was a kid, maybe other people did too," he said. "We just have to make them remember." Inspired, Emily agreed. She and Noah began writing short notes with uplifting messages. Phrases like, "The magic of Christmas lies in sharing hope," and "Small gestures create big miracles," were carefully written on pieces of colorful paper. At night, the two went out to distribute the notes anonymously around the town, leaving them in mailboxes, shop windows, and on doorsteps. At the same time, Henry was fighting his own battle. He visited elderly neighbors, local shopkeepers, and even the younger crowd at school, trying to persuade them to take part in a community Christmas event. Despite his efforts, most people remained skeptical. The town had been hit hard by economic struggles in recent years, and the usual Christmas enthusiasm felt like a distant memory. "Henry, it's a lovely idea," said Mrs. Jenkins, the owner of the local bakery. "But people are tired. I don't know if they'll join in." The rejection began to weigh on him, but Henry refused to give up. In a moment of desperation, he returned to the chest in his garage, searching for inspiration. There, he found another letter, this one from a boy named Nathan. Years earlier, Nathan had written a wish that Henry had never forgotten. "Dear Santa, I want everyone in the town to have a Christmas dinner. It doesn't matter if there's nothing left for me." Nathan's selfless wish lit a spark in Henry's heart. It reminded him that the spirit of Christmas wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was about kindness, connection, and the willingness to care for others. With renewed determination, he decided to focus his efforts on creating something simple yet meaningful, a community Christmas dinner where everyone could gather, share, and rediscover the joy of the season. Henry reached out to Mrs. Jenkins, explaining his new idea. "If we work together, maybe we can make it happen," he said. "It doesn't have to be extravagant, just something to bring people together." Mrs. Jenkins hesitated, but eventually smiled. "All right, Henry, let's give it a try. I'll bake the bread." Bit by bit, Henry's determination began to spread. Others in the town, inspired by the notes Emily and Noah had left, or by Henry's persistence, slowly started to join in. As the days passed, Snowy Pines began to stir with a sense of anticipation, as though the magic of Christmas was quietly making its way back into their lives. The selflessness of that letter reignited an idea in Henry. The event needed to be something that truly brought people together, not just as a symbolic gesture, but as a shared experience. He decided to organize a community Christmas dinner where everyone could contribute whatever they could, be it food, decorations, or simply a helping hand to set up the event. Excited, Henry returned to town with his new idea. To his surprise, some residents began to show interest. Mrs. Jenkins offered to bake bread for free, the local butcher pledged to donate meat, and a young artist volunteered to paint posters to promote the event. Bit by bit, the plan started to take shape. Meanwhile, Emily and Noah kept working. The anonymous notes they had distributed around town were starting to stir curiosity. Some people tucked the papers into their pockets as keepsakes, while others read them aloud to friends and family. The message seemed to be spreading. However, not everything was going smoothly. At home, Clara remained increasingly withdrawn. Despite Emily's efforts, the exhausting demands of her job and the painful memories of the past had built an impenetrable wall around her. One evening, after finding a note on her mirror that Emily had written, "Mom, you are my greatest gift," Clara broke down. "Emily, I know you want to help me," Clara said, her voice heavy with emotion. "But it's not that simple. There are things even Christmas can't fix." Clara's words cut Emily deeply, like a knife to her heart. For the first time, she began to doubt whether there was any hope of bringing her mother's smile back. Noah, however, refused to give up. "We can't quit now," he said firmly. "My grandma always told me the darkest night is the one right before dawn." That same night, Henry had an unexpected idea. He decided to share Clara's childhood letter with her. With Emily's permission, he went to their house the following day. Clara, visibly surprised to see Henry at her door, hesitated before letting him in. "Henry, what brings you here?" she asked, her voice tired. Without saying a word, he extended the letter. Clara took the paper with trembling hands and began to read. Her eyes filled with tears as the words of her childhood came back to life. When she finished, she sat in silence for a long time before finally looking up at Henry. "I wrote this such so long ago. How did you get it?" "I've kept all the letters, Clara," Henry explained. "I guess I always knew in some way that they might be important someday. And this one, well, it reminded me that Christmas can still be magical, even for those who've lost so much." Clara glanced at Emily, who was standing in the doorway, watching everything with anticipation. For the first time in years, something in Clara's eyes seemed to shift. It wasn't a full smile, but there was a glimmer of recognition, as if she was beginning to remember the person she had been before the pain. As the community dinner approached, Henry, Emily, and Noah combined their efforts to finalize the preparations. The entire town became involved, and excitement began to ripple through Snowy Pines. Still, a lingering sense of uncertainty remained. Would the event be enough to bring Clara back to the joy of Christmas, or would it be just another failed attempt to restore something that seemed lost forever? On the night before the big event, Emily made one last wish to Santa, gazing at the stars through her bedroom window. "Please, Santa, don't let my mom lose hope again." The sky seemed to answer her with an extra twinkle, and the little girl went to bed with her heart full of anticipation. The fate of Snowy Pines, and of Clara herself, was about to change forever. The night of the community dinner arrived, and Snowy Pines felt transformed. The central square, usually quiet in the winter, was alive with activity. Rows of tables draped in red and green cloths stretched in a long corridor beneath the twinkling lights of the towering Christmas tree. The aroma of freshly baked bread and hot chocolate mingled with the sound of laughter and cheerful conversation. A small local band played Christmas carols, filling the air with familiar melodies that warmed even the coldest of hearts. Families and friends gathered, sharing stories and smiles. People who hadn't spoken in years exchanged greetings, and the sense of connection that had been missing from the town for so long began to reappear. The spirit of Christmas seemed to be rekindling in Snowy Pines. But one question remained. Would it be enough to heal Clara's heart? Emily and Noah were busy helping with the final decorations, while Henry, dressed in his traditional Santa suit, moved among the guests, making sure everything was in place. Despite the apparent success of the event, he couldn't shake his nerves. Clara had confirmed she would come, but he knew the real challenge lay in helping her reconnect with the spirit of Christmas. When Clara arrived, accompanied by Emily, her steps were hesitant. She wore a simple coat, and her expression was serious, as if she had been dragged to the event against her will. But something shifted the moment she stepped into the square. The music, the lights, and especially the smiling faces of her neighbors seemed to soften the barriers she had built over the years. Emily squeezed her mother's hand, hopeful, while Noah waved at them from across the crowd. At the center of the square, Henry climbed onto a small makeshift platform and called for everyone's attention. In his hands, he held a stack of letters, the very same ones he had found in his garage. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Tonight isn't just a celebration of Christmas. It's a celebration of what makes this town special, our ability to care for one another. And today, I want to share something very important." Henry paused, looking out at the crowd. Then he began reading the letters, selecting those that reflected the selfless spirit of the children of Snowy Pines. There were requests for toys for younger siblings, wishes for health for sick relatives, and even hopes for peace in the town. With each letter, the faces in the crowd lit up with emotion. Finally, Henry reached Clara's letter. Without mentioning her name, he read the words she had written as a child. "Dear Santa, please never let my family lose hope in Christmas. I know Christmas can be magical." The words hung in the air, echoing as a reminder of what truly mattered. Clara, who had stayed at the back of the crowd, felt the weight of those phrases wash over her like a wave. Her eyes filled with tears, and she gripped Emily's hand tightly. Something inside her seemed to break, not from sorrow, but as if an old pain was finally being released. Henry continued, now addressing everyone directly. "These words reminded me of something I had forgotten too. Christmas isn't about presents or lights. It's about hope, love, and the strength we find in being together. And tonight, I hope all of you carry that with you." The crowd erupted into applause, but Henry's eyes stayed on Clara. At last, she smiled, a small, shy smile but genuine. Emily threw her arms around her mother, and for the first time in years, Clara hugged her back fully, as though allowing herself to feel again. The dinner carried on with a renewed energy. People shared stories, laughter, and food, strengthening bonds that had frayed over time. Encouraged by Emily, Clara began to engage with her neighbors. One moment stood out. Mrs. Jenkins from the bakery approached with a loaf of sweet bread that Clara used to buy when Emily was little. "I remember how much you loved this bread," Mrs. Jenkins said with a warm smile. "It's so good to see you here." Clara accepted the bread with a more confident smile. It was as if each small act of kindness was helping her rebuild something she had believed lost forever. As the evening progressed, Henry approached Emily. Kneeling down to her height, he said, "You knew what you were doing all along, didn't you? You didn't just ask for a gift, you asked for hope for all of us." Emily beamed, her eyes sparkling. "I just wanted my mom to smile again, but I guess everyone needed that too." Moved, Henry handed her a small gift wrapped in red paper. "This is for you. Something my wife Margaret used to say, never underestimate the power of a child who believes in the impossible." Emily unwrapped the gift to find a small golden star, delicately carved from wood. Henry explained it was the first ornament he and Margaret had made together for their toy store. "You brought the magic back, Emily. Thank you for reminding me what Christmas is all about." The night ended with the community gathered around the tree, singing a carol together. Clara, standing beside Emily, seemed finally free of the weight that had burdened her for so long. When the final note echoed into the crisp night air, Clara turned to Henry. "Thank you for everything. I don't think I could have done this without you." Henry smiled but shook his head. "It wasn't me, Clara. It was your daughter. She never gave up on you." As Clara embraced Emily once more, Henry looked up at the sky. The stars shone brightly, as if the universe itself was celebrating. He knew this night marked not just a special Christmas, but the beginning of something greater, a tradition of hope, love, and unity that would continue to grow in Snowy Pines. And as he walked home, alone but at peace, Henry whispered to himself, "Margaret, I think we've done our part. Merry Christmas."